So I want you to imagine spending years building a state-of-the-art spaceship. You secure millions in funding. You handpick the absolute greatest astronauts on the planet. And it's all with this one grand goal of being the first to walk on Mars.
Right. The ultimate mission.
Exactly. But before you even leave Earth's orbit, the ship's engines just catastrophically fail. You don't get to go to Mars. You don't even get to, like, turn around and come home.
Yeah, the mission is just gone.
Completely gone. Instead, your new mission is simply surviving inside this slowly disintegrating wreckage of your ship for a year and a half while it just floats through the freezing vacuum of space.
It really is the ultimate subversion of what we consider an expedition, because today, we are pulling apart a highly detailed production brief and historical narrative document covering the 1914 Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition.
Led by Sir Ernest Shackleton.
Right, led by Shackleton. And the goal was to cross the Antarctic continent on foot. Yet the profound irony sitting at the absolute center of our source material is that the 28 men aboard the ship, the Endurance, they never even set foot on the mainland.
Not a single boot print.
Yeah.
I mean, we are deconstructing the greatest rescue that almost didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's a story where the original goal just vanishes entirely. Think about planning the ultimate road trip,
Yeah.
You've hyped it up, you're ready to drive coast to coast, but your car breaks down before you even hit the highway.
And worse, you end up living inside that broken down car.
For almost a year.
Yeah.
While it is slowly, agonizingly being crushed by a giant vice. I mean, what happens to the human mind when that massive, defining ambition is abruptly replaced by a single, terrifying obsession with just not dying?
Well, to understand how that trap closes, we really have to look at the environment they sailed into. By January 1915, the Endurance is pushing through the Weddell Sea. And this isn't a sudden shipwreck. They don't hit a roof and scramble for the lifeboats in some cinematic panic. They get caught in the pack ice. But to truly grasp the horror of that, we have to explain what Weddell Sea pack ice actually is.
Because it's not just a frozen lake.
No, not at all. Think of it as a massive, grinding jigsaw puzzle the size of France, floating on top of a violent ocean.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because if you were sitting on frozen ocean ice, the immediate logical question you'd ask is, why couldn't they just pack up their sleds and hike across that ice back to the continent where they started? Or, to a known outpost?
Right, and that is exactly what a lot of people assume, but it completely ignores the physics of the environment.
How so?
Well, the ice is constantly drifting. It's driven by deep ocean currents and brutal tidal forces. So it's fracturing, it's buckling, and piling up into these massive pressure ridges.
Like walls of ice.
Exactly. Walls of jagged ice blocks that can be 20 feet high. You just can't drag heavy wooden lifeboats and tons of supplies over a constantly moving, collapsing mountain range of ice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were effectively on a very slow, very unpredictable conveyor belt that was just going nowhere.
So they are frozen fast. And the transition here is staggering to me. I mean, these are active, driven men. They're mechanics, scientists, seasoned sailors.
They are doers by nature.
Exactly. And suddenly they're reduced to passive captives. The source text describes the eerie patience of the ice. They are just sitting there on a ship going nowhere, watching the Antarctic winter circle them.
Closing in day by day.
Right, knowing the sun is about to disappear for months.
And we really can't overstate the psychological torture of the sound either, because the ice isn't silent.
Right, it's moving.
Yeah, as the ocean currents push millions of tons of pack ice against the hull of the Endurance, the ship is squeezed. The text notes how the ship would groan and scream in the night like a living thing.
That is terrifying.
Imagine trying to sleep in a wooden box while someone operates a hydraulic press on the outside of it. It's this constant acoustic reminder that the walls of your sanctuary are slowly failing.
I want to dig into the physics of that failure, actually. Because the Endurance was arguably the strongest wooden ship of her age, right? She was specifically built for polar exploration.
She was, yes.
So why did she get crushed when other famous polar ships like Fridtjof Nansen's Fram survived being frozen in the ice for years?
It all comes down to hull design. The Fram was designed with a rounded, U-shaped hull.
Okay.
So when the ice pressure squeezed it, the physics of that shape forced the ship to pop upward. It would rest on top of the ice like a slippery seed being squeezed between your fingers.
Oh, that makes sense. It just slides up.
Exactly. The Endurance, however, had a more traditional V-shaped keel. It was designed to cut through loose ice.
Ah, so it was sharper.
Right. Because her sides were relatively straight, When the millions of tons of lateral pressure hit her, she couldn't pop up. She just absorbed all that force until her massive oak and greenheart timbers simply snapped.
Which brings us to the visceral climax of this period, October to November 1915. After 10 months of this creeping dread, the pressure finally wins.
The trap snaps shut.
Yeah, the ship's sides buckle, the water rushes in, and the men are forced to abandon her. They are literally standing out on the ice watching their only way home, a ship they had built their entire lives around, get violently dismantled by nature.
And we really must frame the absolute isolation of this moment for you. It is 1915. They don't have a radio.
No GPS.
They can't ping a satellite. No one on the planet even knows where they are. And Europe is deeply entrenched in the First World War.
The world is literally burning back home.
Exactly. The nearest human being is hundreds of miles away across drifting ice.
This is where I genuinely struggle to comprehend the mental fortitude involved. When the bottom of your world drops out, literally, when the masts of your ship splinter and vanish into the dark water, how does a group of 28 freezing, stranded men not instantly fracture into complete panic or mutiny or despair?
What's fascinating here is that it entirely rests on Shackleton's immediate, almost unnatural pivot in leadership.
Yeah.
The grand Victorian dream of crossing the continent dies the exact second the hull breaches. But Shackleton doesn't mourn it.
He doesn't, lock himself in his tent.
No, he doesn't spend a week weeping over his lost ambition. He steps out, gathers his men, and quietly replaces the dead mission with a new, singular thesis. 28 men go in, 28 men come out alive.
Not glory, not discovery, just absolute stubborn preservation. He realizes that if he allows the men to look backward at what they've lost, they will die.
Right, psychologically they wouldn't survive it.
So he forces them to look exclusively at what they have to do next. But let's be real about what next actually looks like. The ship is gone, and they are utterly homeless on a frozen ocean.
Which throws us into the unglamorous reality of late 1915 through April of 1916. For 5 months, they live on these drifting ice floes.
Just floating camps.
Yeah, they refer to their camps with grim names like Ocean Camp and Patience Camp. And this period radically redefines what we think of as endurance.
Right, because usually when we picture extreme endurance, we imagine this montage of heroics. Someone climbing a rock face with bloody fingers or sprinting the final mile of an ultramarathon.
The cinematic version.
Exactly. But here, true endurance is just the agonizing, daily, boring refusal to die. It is waking up in a sleeping bag that is frozen stiff because it absorbed the moisture from your own breath.
Which is just a miserable image.
Putting on clothes soaked in seal blubber and just sitting there.
Let's look at the mechanics of their survival gear for a second, because it was brutal. They were wearing wool and tightly woven cotton gabardine.
No Gore-Tex back then.
None. And once it got wet, from snow, sweat, or the horrific greasy smoke of the blubber stoves they used for cooking, it stayed wet. And in sub-zero temperatures, wet clothing acts as a massive thermal drain. They were in a state of chronic, painful shivering for months.
And the diet. We have to talk about hoosh.
Oh, hoosh.
It sounds like something out of a Dickens novel, but it was basically their lifeblood. It's a thick stew made of pemmican, which is dried meat and fat crushed up sledging biscuits and melted ice.
Just a sludge of calories.
Day after day, sitting in a filthy, smoky tent eating hoosh. And eventually, as the seal and penguin populations migrate away for the winter and the food runs out, they have to make the most devastating pivot of all. They have to eat the dogs.
This is a profound psychological blow. I mean, these weren't just random animals. They were highly trained, specific breeds of sledge dogs that the men had bonded with deeply over a year and a half.
They loved these dogs.
They really did. Men like the expedition's photographer, Frank Hurley, and the meteorologist, Leonard Hussey, had formed intense attachments to their teams. Shooting and butchering those dogs wasn't just a loss of transport. It was the ultimate marker that their situation had degraded to the absolute bottom rung of survival.
It's the moment the reality of their starvation truly sets in. But even this grim existence on the ice isn't stable, right? They're just waiting for the ocean currents to push their massive raft of ice north into warmer waters. But warmer waters mean the ice melts. And in April 1916, the holding pattern violently breaks. The solid ground they've been living on for 5 months literally disintegrates beneath their feet. A crack rips right through their camp in the middle of the night.
A man actually fell in his sleeping bag, and Shackleton had to haul him out.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it was chaotic. So they are forced into the water. They launched their 3 small salvaged lifeboats into the open Southern Ocean. And this is a terrifying escalation.
Because they're leaving the ice.
Exactly. They are creating the precarious stability of a shrinking ice floe for the chaotic violence of the sea.
5 brutal days at sea. I mean, imagine being crammed into a rowboat, sitting in freezing salt water, completely exposed to the wind. The men are suffering from advanced frostbite, their skin is covered in saltwater boils, and paradoxically, they are severely dehydrated.
Right, because the sea spray has contaminated their fresh water,
But then a miracle happens. They hit land. Elephant Island.
which is where the universe plays its cruelest joke.
So what does this all mean? Think about how you'd feel as a listener. You step onto solid ground for the first time in 497 days, almost a year and a half since you touched a rock or dirt. You'd think, this is it, we're saved, the credits can roll. But no. What is the actual reality of Elephant Island?
Well, it is a dead end. Elephant Island is a storm-battered, glacier-covered rock jutting out of the ocean at the edge of the world.
It sounds miserable.
It is. It offers a tiny sliver of beach, but more importantly, it is entirely outside of any known shipping lanes. The whalers don't go there, rescue ships don't go there.
No one is looking for them there.
Exactly. By reaching Elephant Island, they survive the ice and the open boats just to reach a place where surviving still isn't enough. If they stay, they will slowly starve to death, entirely forgotten by the world.
Which forces Shackleton into another impossible corner. Waiting means dying. If rescue isn't coming, rescue has to be fetched. And this sets up what has to be the most insane, awe-inspiring centerpiece of this entire deep dive, the open boat journey.
Shackleton realizes he needs to reach the whaling stations on South Georgia Island. To do that, he selects 5 men, including his brilliant but eccentric navigator, Frank Worsley, and the expedition's carpenter, a tough, cynical Scottish shipwright affectionately known as Chippy McNish.
I love that name.
Right. And they take the sturdiest of the 3 lifeboats, the James Caird.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to properly contextualize the James Caird. It is 22 feet long.
Tiny.
To put that in perspective, that is roughly the size of 2 parked cars placed bumper to bumper. Think about getting seasick on a huge commercial ferry in a slight breeze. Now imagine taking a wooden boat the size of 2 cars into the Southern Ocean, which is universally acknowledged by sailors as the most violent, unforgiving stretch of water on the planet.
And they have to travel 800 miles in it.
800 miles.
This is where Chippy McNish's genius really comes into play, because he knows an open boat will be swamped in minutes in those seas. So using nothing but scavenged wood from the other lifeboats, some canvas, and frozen seal blood.
Wait, seal blood?
Yeah, as a sort of makeshift caulk to seal the seams. He essentially builds a makeshift roof over the James Caird and raises its sides to give them a fighting chance against the waves. It's an absolute masterpiece of desperate engineering.
But even with a roof, the details of this 16-day voyage are just horrifying. They are hit by hurricane-force winds. The cold is so intense that sea spray is constantly freezing onto the hull and the canvas roof, accumulating as thick, heavy ice.
And we need to explain the physics of why that is a literal death sentence for them.
Please do.
It's an issue of buoyancy and top heaviness. As hundreds of pounds of ice build up on the upper surfaces of this tiny boat, its center of gravity shifts dangerously upward.
Making it unstable.
Exactly. If it gets too top-heavy, the next wave will simply roll the boat completely upside down, trapping them underneath.
So, to prevent that, the men have to take turns crawling out onto the wildly pitching, slippery deck in the pitch-black, freezing wind and physically chip the ice away with axes.
While the boat is just violently throwing them around.
One slip, and you're in the ocean. And the boat can't turn around to get you. It is pure, concentrated terror. And there's one specific detail from the source text that perfectly captures this environment. Shackleton is at the tiller one night, and he looks behind them and sees what he thinks is a break in the storm clouds.
A line of clear white sky.
Yeah. He actually calls out to the men that the weather might be clearing.
But it wasn't the sky, it was the crest of a wave.
A rogue wave so massive, so towering, that it literally filled the horizon and blotted out the sky. A wall of water bearing down on a 22-foot boat. Shackleton later wrote that in all his years at sea, he had never seen a wave so gigantic.
It's hard to even picture.
They somehow rode it out, bailing water frantically for their lives.
But surviving the physics of the ocean is one thing. We really have to spotlight how they actually found their target. If Shackleton was the engine of this journey, Frank Worsley, the navigator, was the steering wheel. And what he accomplished borders on the supernatural.
Right, because South Georgia is an 80-mile-long island in a massive ocean. It's a pinprick, and they are being blown wildly off course by hurricanes. How do you actually navigate when you can't see the stars and the sun only appears for a few seconds every few days?
Worsley had to rely on a mix of dead reckoning and incredibly difficult celestial navigation. To use a sextant, which is the instrument used to measure the angle between the sun and the horizon to calculate latitude, you need a steady platform and a clear view of the horizon.
Two things he absolutely did not have.
Exactly. Worsley is standing in a boat that is bucking like a bronco, pitching up and down 30 feet on these massive ocean swells. Two men have to physically hold him by the waist so he doesn't fall overboard. And he has maybe a 3-second window when the boat crests a wave and the sun peeks through the clouds to take his reading.
And he's doing this while suffering from severe dehydration, frostbite, and sheer exhaustion. His hands are freezing to the brass of the instrument. He's doing complex trigonometry in his head while a hurricane screams around him.
The mental load is just staggering.
If his math is off by even a fraction of a degree, they sail past South Georgia, get swept out into the open Atlantic, and everyone dies. The men in the boat and the 22 men left behind on the island.
But his math isn't off. After 16 days in a washing machine of ice and terror, Worsley guides them directly to the coast of South Georgia. Against all laws of probability, they see land.
But as is the brutal theme of this entire deep dive, a victory just means you've unlocked a new, seemingly insurmountable problem. The hurricanes have battered them so badly that they're forced to land on King Haakon Bay, which is on the completely wrong side of the island.
Right. To understand the gravity of this, you have to picture the geography of South Georgia. The whaling stations, the humans, the food, the ships, they are all on the northern coast.
And Shackleton has landed on the southern coast.
Exactly. And running down the spine of the entire island is a jagged, uncharted mountain range covered in massive glaciers.
They can't sail around the island because the James Caird is literally falling apart and its rudder is compromised. 3 of the men are physically broken, just too weak to walk. So Shackleton realizes that he, Worsley, and a tough Irish sailor named Tom Crean have to cross the interior of the island on foot.
Keep the timeline in perspective here, too. These men have been enduring extreme freezing deprivation for over a year and a half.
They're emaciated.
They have just survived a 16-day maritime nightmare. They are operating on 0 reserves. And now they have to perform a mountaineering feat that no human being in history had ever accomplished.
With no gear.
Yeah.
They don't have climbing ropes or crampons or anything. They literally take some heavy brass screws out of the lifeboat and push them through the soles of their boots so they have some grip on the ice.
It's just incredible.
They carry 50 feet of rope and a carpenter's adze to chop steps into the glaciers. That's it.
For roughly 36 hours straight, they march. They hike up jagged peaks, stare down into impenetrable fog, realize they've gone the wrong way, backtrack, and slide down glaciers in the dark, hoping there isn't a cliff at the bottom.
Just sliding into the unknown.
Yeah, they are navigating entirely by instinct and moonlight, knowing that if they stop and fall asleep, the cold will kill them.
During this crossing, there is a psychological phenomenon that Shackleton documents, and it is arguably one of the most famous takeaways from the entire expedition. He later wrote about this desperate push across the mountains, and he said that during the hardest parts of the march, it often seemed to him that there were not 3 men walking, but 4.
And both Worsley and Crean later admitted they felt the exact same presence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a deep dive into the neurology of extreme survival. It's widely known today as the third man factor, though here it was a 4th. But what actually is it? Because my first thought is they are starving, they are dehydrated, they haven't slept in days. It's just an auditory or visual hallucination, right? Like a mirage.
It's much more complex than a simple glitch in the brain, actually. Psychologists and neurologists who study extreme stress believe it's a sophisticated coping mechanism built into the human brain.
How does that work?
Well, when the physical body is pushed past the absolute boundaries of what is medically survivable, when you are on the razor's edge of physiological collapse, the brain recognizes that panic or despair will result in immediate death.
So it manufactures a safety net.
Precisely. To keep the body moving, the brain creates the sensation of a comforting, guiding presence, a companion to share the unbearable load. It's a profound internal trigger that flips only when all external safety is gone.
That is fascinating.
The fact that all three men experienced this vivid, stabilizing presence simultaneously really speaks to how violently close they were to the absolute limits of human physiology.
And it works. It keeps them putting one foot in front of the other until eventually they hear a sound they haven't heard in nearly 2 years.
The steam whistle.
The steam whistle of the Stromness whaling station.
Mm.
These three men, filthy, their hair matted with salt, their faces blackened by months of blubber smoke, wearing literal rags, they stagger down the mountain and walk into the station. The station manager, who had actually hosted them before the expedition began, doesn't even recognize them. They look like ghosts.
They had made it. It is one of the most triumphant moments in exploration history, but we really have to actively push back against the urge to end the story here.
Right.
Because while Shackleton is sitting in a warm room eating real food, the true test of his leadership and the agonizing emotional core of this narrative is sitting 800 miles away in the pitch black.
Let's shift our perspective back. It is May 1916. Shackleton sailed away weeks ago. On the desolate, rocky beach of Elephant Island, 22 men are left behind under the command of Frank Wild, Shackleton's second-in-command. They are living underneath the two remaining upturned lifeboats.
They affectionately, or perhaps ironically, named this grim, claustrophobic shelter the Snuggery.
The Snuggery.
Imagine 22 starving men crammed shoulder to shoulder in the dark, breathing in the thick, suffocating smoke of burning seal blubber, listening to hurricane winds try to rip the boats off their heads.
Frank Wild's role here is a masterclass in crisis management, because the environment is trying to kill them physically, but the waiting is trying to kill them psychologically. Think about a time you were waiting for a highly stressful email, or medical test results, or a phone call that never came.
The anxiety is awful.
Your mind immediately spirals to the worst-case scenario. Now, multiply that anxiety by 130 days in the dark while your body is slowly digesting its own muscles from starvation.
Wild completely understood that despair is contagious and lethal. If a man gave up hope, he would simply stop eating, stop moving, and freeze to death. So Wild constructed what we can call the architecture of hope. He instituted a rigid daily routine.
What did you do?
Every single morning, without fail, he would order the men to roll up their damp, freezing sleeping bags, and he would look at them and say, "The boss might come today."
Every single day, even when there was a blizzard outside, even when the pack ice had blown back in and choked the bay, making a rescue ship physically impossible. The boss might come today.
By forcing them to physically prepare for rescue every morning, he prevented them from surrendering to the weight. He kept their brains in a state of active anticipation rather than passive despair. It was a brilliant, desperate psychological trick.
But the truth of what was happening out in the ocean makes that wait even more agonizing. The standard myth is that Shackleton reaches South Georgia, grabs a big ship, and immediately swoops back down like an action hero to save the day.
That is entirely false, and it ignores the sheer torment Shackleton went through.
Right, you'd think once he reached the whaling station, the story is over. But that's not what happens. He tries to go back almost immediately. He secures a ship, the Southern Sky, and sails south. But the pack ice, the same enemy that crushed the Endurance, has surrounded Elephant Island. It physically blocks him.
He tries to push through, but the ship isn't built for ice, and he's forced to turn back.
So he goes to Uruguay. He borrows another ship. He sails south again. Again, the ice stops him. He goes to Chile, gets a schooner called the Emma, and tries a third time. And for a third time, nature systematically rejects his attempt at salvation.
This raises an important question, though. The psychological torment of that is staggering. Imagine surviving the ice, the boat journey, the mountains, only to be repeatedly denied the chance to save the men who trusted you with their lives.
It must have been crushing.
And meanwhile, months are crawling by. May becomes June, June becomes July, July becomes August.
And down in the Snuggery on Elephant Island, the food is running out. They are boiling old seal bones, trying to extract a few calories of fat. Some of the men's toes have blackened with gangrene. And the outspoken terror hanging in the air is that Shackleton never made it. For all they know, the James Caird sank on day one, and they are rolling up their sleeping bags for a ghost.
But finally, the ice relents. It is late August 1916. The Chilean Navy lends Shackleton a small, steel-hulled steam tug called the Yelcho, commanded by Captain Luis Pardo. This is the fourth attempt.
On August 30th, 1916, the Yelcho navigates through the fog and approaches the jagged coast of Elephant Island. Picture the scene from the beach. It's time for lunch. The men are inside the Snuggery, boiling seal bones. Suddenly, one of the men outside spots a break in the fog. He sees a mast.
He starts screaming.
The men trip over each other, bursting out from under the boat. They are frantically lighting a signal fire with whatever blubber and clothes they can find, terrified the ship will turn around.
And on the ship, the tension is just as high. Shackleton is standing at the very tip of the bow of the Yelcho. As they approach the shoreline, he is straining his eyes, looking through his binoculars. He is desperately counting the tiny ragged figures running around on the beach.
He needs to know. He needs to know if his singular, obsessive promise to bring every man home was achieved, or if the weight killed them. As the ship gets close enough, Shackleton cups his hands and yells over the crashing waves, "Are you all well?"
And Frank Wilde, standing on the rocky beach, calls back over the water, "All safe, all well."
All safe, all well. Think about the impossibility of those 4 words. According to his own later accounts, Shackleton heard that reply, and he just froze. He couldn't speak. He just stood there.
Because it defies all laws of probability. 28 men went into the pack ice. Their ship was crushed into splinters. They lived on frozen water for months. They sailed open boats through a hurricane. They crossed uncharted glaciers. They starved. They froze. They waited in the dark. And yet 28 men were coming home.
It is the ultimate victory of human resilience. But what's incredible is that this deep dive actually has a postscript, a final, literal echo from the ice that waited over a century to reveal itself.
And it perfectly encapsulates the entire theme of our source material. In 2022, a modern expedition team deployed autonomous underwater vehicles into the Weddell Sea, scanning the dark ocean floor in the exact area where Frank Worsley had recorded the ship's final coordinates.
And more than 10,000 feet down, in the pitch-black, freezing water, they found her, the wreck of the Endurance.
The visual evidence from that discovery is breathtaking because of the extreme cold, the lack of light, and crucially, the absence of wood-eating organisms like teredo worms, which destroy shipwrecks in warmer waters. The Endurance was profoundly preserved.
She wasn't a scattered debris field of rotting timber. She was sitting perfectly upright on the seafloor. The ship's wheel was intact, and the footage shows the stern proudly bearing the 5-pointed star and her name, Endurance, still perfectly, hauntingly legible.
It acts as a stunning physical metaphor. The very ship they watched die, the symbol of their trapped failure and their lost dream, was still there, holding its shape a century later. History is often just a ledger of tragedies and warnings, but the physical survival of that shipwreck serves as undeniable proof that what was lost was real, and that the capacity to endure is far stronger than the forces trying to crush it.
It bridges the extreme history to our everyday reality. Think about the things we lose in our own lives. The passion projects that fail, the careers that stall, the plans that get crushed under the weight of circumstances we entirely cannot control. This ship came back from the deep to tell us that the past doesn't just vanish. Sometimes, a lost ship surfaces to remind us of our own infinite capacity to survive the impossible.
To synthesize what we've unpacked today, Sir Ernest Shackleton failed his mission. He never crossed Antarctica. But because of his brilliant improvised leadership, 28 men walked onto the ice and 28 walked home. It wasn't a military victory, and it wasn't blind luck. It was the result of a leader who refused to spend a single life he was entrusted with, and a crew that chose, in the face of absolute despair, to roll up their sleeping bags every single day.
I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the ice, the mechanics of survival, and the outer limits of the human spirit. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We started by talking about the frustration of a massive trip falling apart. If the ultimate legendary triumph of Ernest Shackleton's life wasn't achieving his original grand mission, but rather his desperate, messy pivot to simply save his team, how often do you fail to recognize your own greatest successes just because they don't look anything like your original plan? Until next time, keep diving deep.